Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the council meeting. I declare the meeting open at 6 p.m. And I'd like to start by acknowledging that tonight we meet on the lands of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. In relation to apologies, we do have apology from Councillor Harley. So we will now move to public question time and receiving of public statements. So welcome members of the public gallery to the meeting this evening. For those who haven't been before, this is your opportunity to come up to the microphone and address council on any matter on the agenda. We do just ask that you state your name, the suburb in which you live and the item that you are speaking to. There's no set order, it's just whoever wishes to come up first. So welcome to the first speaker. So that takes us to item 4, which is applications for leave of absence. We do have one application, and that is from Councillor Dan Loden, who is seeking to take leave on the 19th and 20th of September. Could I please have a mover and seconder to approve the leave of absence? Move Councillor Murphy, seconded Councillor Hallett. All those in favour? I declare the leave request carried. It then takes us to receiving of petitions, deputations and presentations. We have none this evening. So going on to item 6, confirmation of minutes. These are the minutes of the ordinary meeting of council on the 20th of August 2019. Could I please have a mover and seconder? Moved Councillor Loden, seconded Councillor Castle. All those in favour? Thank you. I declare the minutes adopted. Item 7, announcements by the presiding member. I do have a few. First of all, I just wanted to let members of the public gallery know this evening we have just started a survey of people visiting the chamber to ask you how you would feel about live streaming council briefing and meeting public question time. We do live stream our council meetings, but up until this point we have not considered streaming the part in which public question time, where members of the public come forward and ask questions and make statements. And we do believe it's very important to seek your views and understand what you think about that and whether that would have an impact on how you feel about speaking at council meetings or council briefings. So if you could just take a moment to fill that out, we'd be very much appreciative. And we will be having a bigger sample size than yourselves, noting that this is quite a quiet meeting, that we will be running this survey for a number of months just to see what people think about that. So would appreciate your views. Also, just to mention that the 2019 Greening Vincent Garden competition is open for entries, and it is a really great competition. It doesn't have to be a big garden. We have a category for balconies. We have a category for businesses. We look at indoor courtyards and verge gardens. So a lot of variety there, and it is something that participants who take part all get invited to the dinner, which is a fantastic celebration of Greening Vincent and our wonderful gardens, and everybody loves to share their gardening tips. So I would encourage everyone to consider taking part and entering one of their gardens into that competition. Also, just to note that I will mention this because I'm not sure whether it will be moved on block, but I would just like to mention that tonight we are looking at the release publicly of the CEO's key performance indicators. This is another important move for Vincent on our ongoing transparency initiatives, in that we're really keen to let our residents and ratepayers know what our focus for the year is and how we plan to measure success in our organisation over the coming year. This has been done very much with our CEO's blessing. He really prides himself on being open and transparent, and we're very happy that this is another initiative being brought forward in being open and transparent to our community. Also, I should mention that we have had an election of some sorts in the City of Vincent. So basically, nominations for the City of Vincent local government election 2019 closed last Thursday, and at the close of nominations we had just 2 candidates for the North Ward, and there being 2 positions in the North Ward, the candidates were elected unopposed. So I'd like to say congratulations to Councillor Dan Loden for securing another 4 years on council, and also, yes. Bravo. And also to Sally Smith, a new member of the team joining us in October, which is very exciting. So well done to both of you. A little bit embarrassing that I am the presiding member and I have to make these announcements. I did ask the CEO if he could do it. He said no, it was my gig. So I do also have to announce that I was also re-elected unopposed and been returned as Mayor of Vincent for another 4 years. So thank you. So we do have an election in our South Ward, and we have 6 candidates, and we will be having a postal election for our South Ward. So election packs will be sent out in late September to our South Ward residents and ratepayers, and yes, more information is available on the election and the candidates on our website at City of Vincent. We have an election page which you can visit to find out more. So thanks for that. And finally, I just wanted to mention a project that might sound a little bit boring, but it's actually really exciting. It's our Brisbane Street car park. We're actually trying to turn the car park into one of the greenest car parks that you've seen in Perth. We're planting. We're basically starting off by doing water-wise garden beds and water capture systems so that water runoff is actually captured to water the garden beds, and we're planting an additional 71 trees in the car park. So eventually we are going to be aiming to achieve a 60% canopy coverage in that car park, and this is the new model and a very sustainable approach to how we redevelop our car parks in the City of Vincent. So we're going for a bit of an urban jungle theme in our car park. So I'm very excited about that project. So that concludes the announcements for this evening. So I'll hand over to the CEO for item 8, which is declarations of interest. Oh, we have none. So I will now go around the table and ask members of council, in addition to the items already raised by members of the public gallery, which items you would like to bring forward for debate this evening. I'll start with you, Councillor Hallett. Last time I tried to do it in reverse, it didn't work so well.
10.1.
Thank you. Councillor Castle, Councillor Murphy, Councillor Loden.
9.4.
Councillor Fotakis, Councillor Toppelberg, Councillor Gondaszewski. Can I just check quickly? So I've got 10.1.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I will now read out the item numbers that are being proposed to be moved en bloc, which includes item 9.1, item 9.3, item 9.6, item 10.2, item 11.1, item 12.1, item 12.2. I think actually the chair has to move the audit committee reports. Sorry, retract that. Not 12.2, which will be moved by the chair of the audit committee. Item 12.3, item 12.4.
Thank you, CEO. Could I please have a mover and seconder for the en bloc items? Moved Councillor Fotakis, seconded Councillor Loden. All those in favour? Declare the en bloc items carried. Just for the benefit of members of the public gallery, the way that we now move through the items is that we go to the items first raised by members of the public, and then we will proceed to go through the agenda sequentially from there. So the first item raised this evening was 9.2, which is number 12 Byron Street, Leederville, proposed 2 group dwellings. Can I have a mover and seconder for this item, please? Thank you, Councillor Toppelberg. Moved and seconded, Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. The objections from the neighbouring properties to the south are clear and they are understood. The issues relating to the issue relating to the street setback, I think, for me, is adequately dealt with in the report. The issue relating to overshadowing or loss of amenity because of the outdoor space, I did have a good look at the history of the approvals on site, and it's clear that, and I'm not sure whether the current occupants of the adjoining properties at number 10 and number 8 were involved in the development at the beginning or purchased that later, but it's clear that the developer of that lot didn't really give much consideration to the northern aspect of those lots. If you look at the actual properties themselves, they are largely blank facades with minor openings, and where the outdoor spaces exist, they were later they were covered in by pergolas. So effectively, whilst I assume that there's I haven't been into the site to see, but I assume that they're translucent and do allow the transmission of some light. Effectively, most of the northern facade for the lot at number 10 is covered in, and so a lot of the light that would be experienced within those 2 properties would be effectively borrowed light, and I'm not convinced that a completely compliant development would afford a significantly greater level of amenity. So for that reason, I'm prepared to accept the officer's recommendation. But I do note that it's particularly where you have these larger east-west facing lots, it probably would be good for council as a whole to consider having some form of encouragement for people to have a uniform placement of their access, so that we were creating light spaces for people where their northern aspect is removed. But as I say, those variations and considering where the actual openings are on those adjacent properties, I'm going to support the officer recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor. I similarly support the officer recommendation. It's a good point that Councillor Topperberg makes. There's a lot of land mass in the city of Vincent that is orientated in this east-west direction, and you're basically going to have buildings developing along those as those transit corridors that we've set up that are increasing density. We're going to encounter this challenge more and more along this street, but along a lot of the streets that we've got because of the orientation of those buildings. And I think we need to think about how we can, within what our limits are within the R codes, to create that extra space and make sure that we are maintaining livable spaces for people as well. Not an easy challenge to resolve for administration, I expect, but something we probably do need to think a bit more about as well.
Councillors? Look, I will make some comments because it is obvious that the overshadowing is the key issue here to the neighbouring properties, and it is, well, it is compliant for the purposes of the R codes, but I understand why the neighbouring residents have raised it as a concern. And I have looked very closely at things that have sort of contributed to overshadowing. There are some setback variations on the southern boundary. There is some fill up to a small amount up to where there is a section retained at 1.5 metres, and there is some very minor height, I think just 20 centimetres with resident Residence A, where there's a 20 centimetre departure. So I have actually gone through the plans closely and highlighted these variations, but when I've actually gone through it, my assessment is that this overshadowing is falling over the roof and the covered patio of the neighbouring property, and that a compliant building would not have a lesser impact where we're talking about those minor openings to the north, and that the only way that it could really be achieved to have a effect on overshadowing to the neighbours would to be to flip the design so that the proposed development had their driveway running along the southern boundary and pushed their development to the northern boundary. That question was asked of the applicant and they have declined, and I understand why they would do that, because they would then face similar issues if the neighbouring property next door to them was to develop a two-storey development. They would then be reliant on that building being set back from the southern boundary to not have overshadowing on their northern aspect. So I think that the way in which the proposed development is designed to be able to capture solar from the north within their lot, and that to ask them to flip the design to save the northern access of the neighbouring property would then mean that they would potentially face similar issues in the future. And because the overshadowing is compliant, we can't refuse it on that basis, and I think that it is really a situation where we have these east-west lot orientations where overshadowing can occur and have an impact on the neighbours. We see it in dwellings where people have solar panels, etc. And I just don't believe that it's reasonable for us to ask the applicant or to refuse on the basis of overshadowing where it is overall compliant, and to seek to do something different would put them in a similar situation moving forward. It was interesting to look back at the setback variations from the neighbouring properties, and I think it is a good lesson about trying to make sure that when we look at and assess developments in the future, that we do consider what may be developed next door, what is permissible under our scheme and our built form policy and the R code, so that when people are developing on their site, they are conscious of what overshadowing could occur in the future, given that we have so many lots of this orientation. So I have had a very close look at this, and I have read through all of the submissions provided in detail. But I have decided that the development is approvable and could not be refused on the grounds that it was being sought by the neighbouring residents. So I do support the application. Are there any further comments? Okay, I'll put the application. All those in favour? I declare it carried unanimously. Next item on the agenda is 10.1. which is the North Perth Common Closure Report. Can I please have a mover and seconder for this item? Moved Councillor Toppelberg, seconded Councillor Hallett.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Just a couple of I did, I guess, ask it as questions or allude to it last week, but now that I'm afforded the opportunity to actually make comment, I will. I think that Mr Zakos pointed out one of the key things that I think is maybe glossed over a little bit in the report is that the plans as they were presented to, well, not only to community but ultimately to the working group itself, were different for a variety of technical reasons to what was actually implemented. And the two key things for me that changed that do have an impact, one is the paving, and whilst it was noted in the documentation, that's not the role necessarily of the community or the working group at the time to be looking through the detail of the documentation, but we have lost some of those circular elements, so the decision to change the colour of the paving, I think it is important to note that, and I would hope that as we look at potentially a phase 2 or something else that moves through that space, that we could be mindful of that as a potential future cost or upgrade to the site, and that would be to have the contrast improved between the light and dark paving, more likely making the dark paving in the circular area so that we are not having large swathes of dark paving. And the other issue, which is obviously of key concern to Mr Zakos, who's in the gallery this evening, is the changing of the trees. I think up until still, if you look at even the last council report that was received before the implementation, it was a range of deciduous trees. I think mostly they were reflecting the Bradford pear, or the pear tree that sits outside the post office. And council expressed some concern about having only deciduous trees and non-natives in the area, and we went back and forth and effectively left it to administration and to the consultant to come up with a solution. But I do take on board the point from that never went back to the community. So as far as they could see, there were a range of pear trees that were going to grow to a certain size and were going to provide pretty much 6 months of shade and 6 months of being bare. Yes, there was discussion at council, but in terms of what they saw and what they expected, what they saw on site, and we know because we were contacted immediately as the trees were put in place, that there were certainly as the adjacent landowner, that's something that we probably missed in not informing them at the very least, or consulting them, probably a better idea on both species and placement. So I will... Do you want me to wait for the seconder to speak, or do you want me just to move my amendment?
No, I do need to go to the seconder
so
first.
I'll speak to the amendment shortly.
Okay. I'll go to the seconder.
Thank you. Not much to add to that. I mean, I think the whole project is fantastic, and it's really great to have that space in North Perth for the community. Don't want to repeat Councillor Topperberg's commentary. I guess just to note that in the report there, under the closure checklist, asked last week about the lessons learned workshop, but that hasn't been updated in the report. Too late now, and I'm not going to attempt to move an amendment around that, just to note it. And just in terms of the commentary from the gallery and Councillor Topperberg, I guess for me, one of the key bits was around the consultation, and I just want to take a little bit of an issue with the comment that only one objection was received about the location, and I think that the objection came from someone who is clearly an important stakeholder in the project due to their location. So I think that's probably a bit of an oversight. But overall, well done to admin for doing the project, and it's a great space for the community.
Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for the benefit of the gallery, a few questions were raised which were addressed in the briefing notes, but for their benefit, if you could provide a response to the questions raised around the height of the tree, how administration would propose to manage the height of the tree, and the issue of itself pruning, the issue of the power lines over that tree, the footpath obstruction by that tree, particularly for wheelchairs, and if the tree was to be moved, what type of tree would administration plant? The same one or a different type?
Through you, Michael, I'll do my best to respond to those. I think the first question was about, is the tree self-pruning? That's a term that's been used. The advice I've been given is it's not self-pruning. That's not a term that we connect to this tree, and it's not actually a eucalypt. So I think we put that in the briefing notes. The footpath, we definitely meet the minimum width required for between the wall of the building and the tree. So that's, I think we already stated that last week. In terms of the height of the tree, the advice I've received from our parks team is it won't grow to 25 metres. We think in that environment it'll reach a maximum of 10 metres, which is one of the reasons why it's been selected. So we don't agree that it will reach 25 metres. And in terms of pruning, obviously there are requirements to stay away from the Western Power lines, so we'll follow the normal procedure and make sure that the tree is pruned while the lines stay in place. I did mention last week about undergrounding, and I know that's been discussed. Obviously that is currently an unlikely scenario due to the cost, and there are no immediate plans for the power lines to be undergrounded. So I suspect for quite a long time in the future the tree will be kept below the power lines as required by Western Power.
Yes, was there a question in relation to the proposed species? Yep.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Cole. We would recommend an ornamental pear if we were to change the tree type. If council wanted a smaller tree, then that's what we would recommend. So non-native. Obviously, we could plant the same tree in a different location, but you'd be faced with the same problems that are raised.
Councillor Loden.
So just more broadly around the point of North Perth Common, I think this is at least the first project that I'm aware of where we've delivered it on schedule and on budget as well, which is great to see as well. So administration needs to be commended for that. I think that has not been common in the past, and it's demonstrated the benefit of a approved project planning process and putting some real rigour into how we do the accounting and the budget on these items as well. So congratulations on that as well.
Councillors. Councillor Konchevsky.
Just a question through you to the Director of Infrastructure and Environment in relation to the recommendation that a Bradford pear would be selected if the tree was to be moved or more appropriate. I'm just wondering, the city's street tree matrix, does that have a filter around planting under power lines as to appropriate tree selection?
So my colleague is referring to my notes. Yes, it does.
And what are the native or non-deciduous tree species identified within the street tree matrix as being suitable for planting under power lines?
Through my call, I'm unable to answer that question right now. Obviously, I could provide that information separately, but I can't answer that right now.
I mean, interestingly, I could answer that question in relation to a number of other local governments that have a public street tree matrix that identifies native trees that are suitable for planting under power lines, and the options aren't just Bradford pear and a 25-metre tree. I absolutely accept the comments from the gallery in relation to the appropriateness of the tree species selected. It probably wouldn't be my personal first choice as to what I would plant under power lines. However, I also do accept that the city has a program for maintaining trees that are planted in proximity to power lines. We do that across the city because we don't have vast tracts of underground power, and for the most part those trees are healthy and still provide shade and amenity within those environments. So I think this has raised some questions for me around our tree selection tool, which took some time to develop and is potentially not actually yielding what I would have liked it to offer up. But that's for another time, and I probably wish that I wasn't talking about trees here because I actually think North Perth Common is fantastic and is a great space. I'm so looking forward to the program of events that the city has planned for this flexible space that's going to be great for the community, but it also, I actually think, sits very well in its context. It's not, it has that striking art installation. It has some space for people to meet and linger. It's going to have mature trees, and I think that it's going to be wonderful for the North Perth community and Vincent more broadly. So I congratulate the administration for delivering this project. It's been really well done, and I guess we'll deal with the issue around the trees through an amendment potentially to come. But yes, I think this is one that we should be ultimately celebrating. It's been a really good project.
Councillor Murphy.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing project. North Perth finally has a physical heart and soul in it, somewhere where public can congregate and enjoy themselves, linger, shop, hang out. I'm sure that the city has already got an amazing activation program in that area planned. Hugely exciting, really big lift for the area. I think if I was a landowner adjoining this amazing space, I would probably look at how I could renovate and make alterations to the building to take advantage of the opportunity that it presents in presenting the building to the public arena. I could see amazing alfresco opportunities. bifold doors, perhaps. There would be numerous amendments that could be done to the building to interact with the public realm in its improved capacity. So that is an opportunity that I would be looking forward to seeing. Congratulations to the administration. Congratulations to the local people involved in the working group who established this amazing area, and thumbs up from me.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillors?
Can I move the amendment, please?
We have an amendment moved. Is there a second of the amendment? Seconded, Councillor Fotakis.
Thank you. So the amendment states, so it's to add a new 2, which is to approve the removal of the tree at the southwest corner, which is effectively right on the edge as you enter, or towards the top edge under the power pole as you enter into North Perth Plaza, and the installation of a new tree. It says approximately 3 metres to the northwest. It's probably, if anything, more northeast, but there's an indicative map that was provided, scribbled and scanned this afternoon at the request of the director. It says an appropriately located and appropriate species to provide afternoon shade to the grassed area can be deciduous or evergreen. So it's the intent of the amendment is to still provide the people who are far more expert in tree selection than me the ability to be able to look at species. I note the administration's comments. The cost is, to me, kind of irrelevant, because I think that this is, for me, the key issue in the space is that particular tree. I also note that when the issue was first brought up, that it probably would have simply been a matter of pointing to a different location to dig the hole than otherwise, because I think that when the trees first went in, that we'd removed the paving but hadn't installed any of the surrounds. I think at the time when we actually had the first site meeting out there, that was actually being done while we were standing there. So some of those costs that are now involved in the moving of the tree would have been able to have been dealt with if it was moved when the issue was first raised. I understand that Mr. Zakos has requested the removal of both trees. I think that the size of the species, or the size of the tree that was planted, which sits a little bit further to the east, not the initial tree, but that got snapped and disappeared, and the one that replaced it is actually a little bit smaller. And I think that as it grows, we'll be able to manage that canopy a lot better under the power lines. I don't think his concern about the issue of potentially dropping leaves or otherwise, I don't think will come to fruition, because I can't see that canopy. I think we have, well, if you take the 4 metre clearance that we're supposed to, the 2 metre clearance that's supposed to be provided, but am I correct that we're supposed to provide 4 metres from the high voltage? So it's 2 metres, but I don't think there's much more than 2 metres between the top of the building and the power lines anyway. So my guess is that it'll end up looking not dissimilar to the ficus that was there for a while, which will get flat topped to some degree. And if that'll be a decision for either the Parks and Gardens team or council at a later date, if that tree that tree canopy isn't able to be managed with the power lines and the building issues. So for me, it's the access issues. It's the fact that we are knowingly have planted a tree directly adjacent to. There's actually 2 poles that exist there. And the fact that it provides no shade to the grassed area. I mean, I agree with all the comments. I think that it's been a fantastic outcome. It looks exactly like what we had in mind, but when you actually look at the amenity that's afforded to people sitting on the grass, other than in the summertime, other than at about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the evening when the sun is at its lowest point, there's actually no shade provided to that grassed area at all. So this, to me, presents that opportunity for the city to be able to deal with the issue of the power lines, deal with the issue of the perceived or real reduced access, even though it technically complies. There is an issue with that component of it for me, and I think that it'll be money well spent to actually improve the amenity of the space even further, and to go back and sit down with the relevant experts to be able to provide a tree that will actually provide shade to that grassed area.
The seconder was Councillor Gontaszewski. Fotakis.
Thank you, Mayor. Reiterating a lot of the comments from Councillor Toppelberg. It was a shame that when the issue was first raised, we didn't actually make, I think, more significant moves to address the issue then. Leaves and gutters, not a major consideration for myself. It was mainly the accessway and the width of the accessway for myself that I was concerned about. Trees drop leaves. That's what they do. It's part of what they do when they're creating shade, but it's ensuring that footpath remains fully accessible. Just a question through to the staff. Is that area reticulated through you, Mayor?
Director.
Yeah, through you, Nicole, the area is reticulated. So part of the cost of relocating a tree would mean that we would need to pull up some pavement and relocate. So wherever the new tree was, there would be reticulation there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my only concern was, depending on the time of the year, that replanting would be done, that we pay heed that we're now sort of like at the end of really the ideal planting season for establishment of particularly large trees. So I'd want nothing to do with the amendment, but maybe consideration to given to when we actually do those works. So I'll be supporting the amendment.
Councillors, Councillor Murphy.
I just had a question. Has the original designer and architect been consulted on this amendment at all? Not that I've expected to, but just in case.
Through you, Nicole, the designer is aware of the proposal, but not made a specific comment. Obviously, it's achievable. The amendment is achievable. The tree could be relocated. It won't be the tree relocated. It'll be a new tree, but it is possible. We've not had a specific feedback from the designer about the change.
Do you know what their comment?
Sorry, just for clarity as well, I did discuss it with them on site at the original site meeting.
Excuse me, Councillor. You're answering the question now, are you?
Or
are you speaking again?
I'm providing an answer to the question.
Okay, well, you do probably need to ask if you can provide an answer
Sure.
to the question through the chair, and I'll grant you that permission.
Madam Mayor, may I pass on some information relevant to Councillor Murphy's
Sure.
question? Thank you. It was discussed briefly, and effectively there is, paraphrasing, but their response was they'll be guided by council, but it was of no great consequence to the design.
Can I just ask a further question then, because if we're going to analyse the response from Emerge Associates, my understanding as a member of the working group was that Emerge Associates, qualified landscape architects, agreed on the position of the trees in the locations where they are currently.
Yeah, through you, Nicole. Yeah, that's correct. Emerge did decide where the trees will be located, and they did take, obviously, the expert advice to do that.
Back to you, Councillor Murphy.
Look, I can kind of see where you're coming from, but I don't really support this. I think that the amount of time and effort and eyeballs and consultation and people involved in this was enormous. I have been down there several times. I haven't seen an issue with this at all. I think it's good how it is. I don't really support sort of last-minute changes like this, so no, I won't be supporting the amendment.
Councillors, Councillor Hallett.
Thanks. I'm happy to support the amendment, specifically around the increased amenity of having some more shade on the grassed area.
Councillors, Councillor Loden.
Just a follow-up question around the space between the wall and the tree. So I note that you've got the tree that's supposed to be removed. If you go on that diagram down the path further towards Fitzgerald Street, there's another tree that looks to be a similar distance. Do you know, firstly, how wide is the space in centimetres, and is the distance between it the same for both of those trees?
Yeah, through you, Nicole. They are both very, very similar. I did measure them, and they're both about 1.2 metres, give or take a centimetre.
So I think 1.2 metres is sufficient space to fit a wheelchair. That's more than adequate space to get through in that area. I mean, you're not going to have two wheelchairs trying to go past each other. They might have to to rejig to get around that, but I think that's manageable. And if we were moving it because of that distance, we'd also need to move the other tree as well. So I guess the question is around whether we want to spend that money to move that tree. I'm unsure, I guess, because I think we can manage the height of the tree by pruning. That's something that we do quite regularly. It's not ideal that this is the outcome. So I need to land on a decision soon, obviously. I'm running out of time. And I'll equivocate until we vote, I guess.
Councillor Castle.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I just have a question. In the comments on the amendment, the administration states the cost of removing one tree, reinstatement and planting in another location is estimated to be $1,500. Does that include... So I guess I'm looking for clarification that the tree can be used elsewhere if it is removed from the common. And does that cost include not just the moving of or putting a new tree in, but also I'm assuming there's more paving or other restoration that will need to be done in the spot where the tree currently is?
Yes, as you may call it, it is an estimate, so it's our best guess from experience. So you're right, it's lifting the paving, planting a new tree in the new space, making sure reticulation water gets there, and then repairing the space where the existing tree is with paving. In terms of the question about can the tree be reused, potentially, but we couldn't guarantee it. They don't always survive that move, so we might attempt to do that, but we couldn't guarantee, which is the reason why we buy a new tree for the new location. That would be the best option.
Look, I'm in a bit of a similar position to Councillor Loden. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to vote on this. I can I take his point that we do currently have sufficient space for wheelchair access, and that was probably one of the most pressing issues for me, because I agree with the comments made before that I think the tree itself can be managed. I am influenced by the comment that for the same cost the city could plant 6 trees of the same size in a park or 10 street trees in another location. So I'm not really helping anyone else make their decision because I haven't made mine, but it's not a clear-cut decision for me.
Let me recommend a path forward. This is my debate, and Councillor Gonchevsky, you wish to speak first? Okay.
Just to let people know, I'm in alignment with Councillor Murphy. I don't believe there's cause for action on the basis of disability access. I take the point that perhaps the tree wasn't the best choice for the situation, and I would hope that we'd have a street tree matrix that might be a little bit more nuanced. But ultimately, we do prune trees under power lines. The height of the power lines and the height of the building makes me pretty clear that we're not going to see too many issues there. And I guess ultimately my basic principle would be if you want extra shade, plant extra trees, don't take one out. So I accept the point that in 12 months' time we may well be receiving some, requests to put in an extra tree, and it may well be in exactly the placement that Councillor Toppelberg has suggested. But I actually see that as being a very separate thing to taking out a tree. So I can't support this, but I do note that administration has said that they would leave the tree in its current position and monitor for a further 12 months. If further issues are noted, then I guess we can make a decision then. But I don't believe that at this point in time there's cause for any action aside from a watching brief.
I agree. I was going to say that I do understand that this is something which has caused Peter some concern, and I acknowledge you've spent a lot of time putting forward your views to council, and I have read all of the emails that you have written to us, but I do believe that the tree can be managed because it does have to be pruned because of its location. My concern was always about trafficability, access, etc. And I think that I still do have some concerns about the tree well cover itself in terms of trafficability. But really, when I read the briefing notes and it talked about the fact that the city will be undertaking a video survey of pedestrian and cyclist movements, and it would also have to be wheelchair users, people movements generally, through the shared space, and that data will be used to assess the need to undertake any further changes to the common. I think for me that's really satisfying, that issue of access and the way in which people walk through the space, whether we can see whether that's inhibiting people walking past with the tree in the location. So I believe that it can, the tree, we've heard from through our director, but from our parks team who are very knowledgeable in tree species, that it's not a eucalypt, it's not a branch dropping species. It would grow to 10 metres if it wasn't inhibited in that space through being close to the power lines, and that it will be trimmed. I think that all of those things point to the tree being managed, and that if there are issues of the way in which people access and walk on and use wheelchairs, etc., through the common, that will become evident through monitoring of the movements of people and cars through that space. So I'm similarly interested in leaving it in situ for 12 months. If we're seeing issues, it would also give us more time to actually plant, choose a good species, etc. And I'm also open to further trees being planted if we think that we do need to provide shade to the lawn. There had been discussion about the lawn needing access to sunlight, etc. So we can, continue to look at that and see where we land there. But I would prefer to wait for the 12 months and see how this evolves rather than take the tree out at this point. Any further comments on the amendment? Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? 3 voting in favour. All those against? 5 voting against. I declare the amendment lost. We're back to the substantive. Are there any further comments on the substantive? Yeah. Okay, I haven't spoken on substantive, so I just wanted to state that we are getting very close to releasing a calendar of events for North Perth Common. We have had a great response to our expressions of interest, and I think we're going to see a great variety of events happening in the space, which again will be very illustrative in looking at how the space is used, how it's trafficked, what the issues are in terms of the variety of different things in that space, and how, it was designed to be flexible space to hold a number of different events. So we'll see it in action. I think that will be further helpful in determining how the space works and any further tweaks in the future. So congratulations, great work team, and look forward to having those events happening in the space. Anything further? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? Declare it carried. Next item is 9.5, which is number 42 Woodville Street, North Perth, proposed 6 multiple dwellings, amendment to approved unauthorised existing development. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Moved Councillor Loden, seconded Councillor Hallett.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to support the amendment. The officer recommendation.
Councillor Hallett.
Similarly happy to support it.
Councillors. Councillor Toppelberg.
Whilst there's clearly support from the neighbours in terms of the outcome, and I don't like to talk that much about aesthetics, but from my point of view, there's clearly an issue in terms of the builder building something contrary to what was approved. But the idea in a design sense of aluminium slats being a direct substitute for something that is timber doesn't sit that well with me. I will support the officer recommendation, but the idea that it's purely there for me, the issue here is, for which I will support the recommendation, is that it's only really impacting upon those neighbours who clearly support it, but they are looking for the benefit of the, I suppose, ameliorating the overlooking issue. But yeah, the prevalence of aluminium slats in design is probably commensurate with its affordability, generally speaking. That's probably a nice way to put it, and we are seeing it pretty much on every front fence, side fence, and everywhere that is allowed, because it is a maintenance-free, cheap option. It is the contemporary gapped version of a colour-bond fence, in my view. So, as I say, this particular circumstance, but the idea that timber, aluminium makes no difference in a design and aesthetic sense in terms of the design intent that was approved by council, with my dissension at the time, I note. It's not one and the same, but ultimately this is about providing a level of amenity to the neighbours that they clearly support. So I will support the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Toppelberg. Any further comments? My understanding was that it was about the slats themselves being something which lets air, ventilation, sunlight through, and that perhaps it wasn't so much the materiality, but I do acknowledge that aluminium is cheaper. And, you know, when you're looking at, obscured glass balconies, that's not attractive either. I think we've got a lot of work to do around privacy on balconies, and I think we still really need to look at designing to suit how I think Design WA is going some way to try to deal with like designing to respond to what is in situ in the neighbouring lots, so that we don't just stick balconies wherever and then have to screen them, because that's not a great outcome for neighbours or for the residents who live on those balconies either, as sometimes primarily as their only outdoor space. So from a ventilation perspective, I think it's not bad, but it's still not a great solution. But it's nice to know that the neighbours are happy, and that after what seems to have been a difficult build, they have reached agreement on this, so happy to support it. Any further comments? Okay, I'll put all those in favour. Declare it carried unanimously. Okay, we'll now move through the agenda sequentially on the items that we haven't yet debated or have been moved on block. So that takes us to item 9.4, Outcomes of Advertising, Mount Hawthorn Town Centre Place Plan. Moved Councillor Castle, seconded Councillor Loden.
Through you, Mayor Cole, very happy to support this item, and I just want to commend the staff on all the work that they've done in developing this, our latest place plan, and noting that broadly very good support from the community when it went out for consultation. So looking forward to seeing many of these items in action.
Councillor Loden.
Thank you, Mayor. Similarly, I'm happy to support the plan. I think 3 comments from me. The proposed Edinburgh Street parking, I think it's really important that we look first to the duration of stay that people are staying on there. I think there is anecdotally a large number of people who are parking all day. I'd much prefer to put in parking restrictions than pay for the cost of creating additional parking. We do have aspirations to increase our utilisation of Axford Park, which may require us to remove bays, and so this might be a good one to have in our back pocket for when that may occur at some point in the future. Secondly, it's a bit of a pain that Main Roads isn't supportive of the Head Start lane. Not much we can do about that, but I guess we have that space there. It's something we probably want to think about as we do further work around that space, around how we can make sure the cyclists are easily able to access to not get jammed between vehicles there as well. And then the last one was just around the nighttime economy, recognising that the retailers are supportive of that and so forth. I'm not convinced that there's going to be a huge demand for a nighttime economy. Mount Hawthorn is a different beast to other areas. Obviously, I have probably a smaller pool and somewhat select pool of people that I interact with on a regular basis, being people who have children under 6 years of age. And a nighttime economy would consist of the hours between 5 and 7, I think. But I don't see Mount Hawthorn becoming a thriving metropolis of nighttime activity, and I think a number of the residents around that area would probably be quite concerned if that did start to occur. So just something for us to consider further as we go forward. Thank you.
Councillor Fotakis.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, Councillor Loden, you may just find that 6-year-old will, before you know it, will become a 16-year-old and be launching himself into a nighttime economy. So these things change. And what I love about this whole process with the place plans and really going really away from that, you're looking at precincts with that conventional land use and really taking a people-centric approach where you've got an ability to really work with the local community and have a look at their vision and their ideas and some innovative ideas, and you can start to see that coming through the plan and the work that the local town team, Mount Hawthorn, hub are doing, and even the comments that are coming through in the consultation. It was really from start to finish. A lot of those, really some great ideas, and it was also heartening to see that many of them already pointing to things that staff are already working on as well, that are already in train. But I mean, the exciting thing that I think about having plans like this is that you've got a process of regular reviews, and it helps keep our planning nimble and responsive to changing community needs and aspirations. So I've no doubt that the community will change. All our communities are changing over time, and I think it's exciting to see that these sort of plans allow us to really be a lot more quicker to respond to those changing needs. So well done on another great document, team. Thank you.
Councillors. Councillor Murphy.
Just wanted to make a quick comment, or two quick comments. Firstly, you totally support the changes from the community. The interesting point, and I've always been an advocate of Wi-Fi in town centres, but talking with the keynote speaker from the recent town team conference on Friday, Gabriella, we were chatting about Wi-Fi in town centres, and she said that it's been the recent introduction of high-speed Wi-Fi in New York has been an abject failure, which I thought was interesting. No one's using it, and because everyone's sort of got their smartphones now, and sort of what's the word when you sync your smartphone with your hotspot, hotspotting. So I thought that was interesting. So not going to. It just says investigate Wi-Fi, so not going to make any changes. But I thought that was interesting. On the nighttime economy, I think there is a nighttime economy already in Mount Hawthorn. We've got 2 small bars, a large beer barn, several restaurants. I wanted 2 large beer barns, and some cool, back alleyway pizza joints and whatnot, and a jazz cellar. I don't know if the administration wanted to expand on the nighttime economy concept, that they've sort of, if they wanted to give any more detail around that. That was a question.
While we throw to Georgia, I'm just also going to add Axford Park Hawkers Markets are contributing to the nighttime economy too. Yeah. Over to you, Place Manager.
Through you, Mayor Cole, during the consultation for this, we visited over 100 businesses and spoke to them individually, and there was certainly an appetite to potentially extend the trading into the evening, maybe not late into the night, but the investigation is going to that we're going to undertake will be the place manager speaking to the businesses again, working out which businesses would potentially like to get involved, and speaking to their customers and working out where we might be able to create some sort of nodes, and where the city might actually be able to run additional initiatives like the hawkers markets to attract people to use the late night businesses when they're open. So learning from, I guess, what happened with What's Up Wednesday, which was a huge undertaking. We intend to take the learnings from that and some of the learnings that we learned from the Town Team Movement Conference on the weekend, and actually get it to be driven again by the business and the community. And if there is no appetite, once we explore this further and consult Dan Loden's friends, Councillor Loden's friends, we won't potentially progress. It'll be up to the community and the businesses. We just want to know how we might be able to help. And so the after-hours trading map actually articulates that we're starting to get a much stronger nighttime economy along Scarborough Beach Road, and we might want to work out how we might be able to improve that along Oxford Street North as well.
Thank you. The only other comment I would have is, because I think got to be careful about restricting nighttime economy. I think if you restrict it too much, you start getting an outbreak of house parties, and I think I think my general view would be, I think the residents of Mount Hawthorn would probably prefer it, around the town centre rather than right next door. And with an ageing teenager population, it's coming, folks. Watch out. The age of the house party.
Any further comments? Councillor Gontaszewski.
I wasn't going to speak, but then Georgia said we're just going to ask how we can help, and I think that that's actually really telling, because the way back when we launched our first place plan, Councillor Murphy made the comment that if you were a person that was looking to get involved in business, and I think this was the North Perth Place Plan, what a fantastic document this was, both setting out council's intentions for the area, but also essentially demonstrating to the community that there's a local government here that's interested in having town centres that are going to succeed and are actively taking steps to make that happen in a manner that is driven by the community and is really ground up. And I think that that process is continuing to grow and will ultimately be to the benefit of all of our town centres and the general sense of engagement that the communities that are part of it, whether they're business owners or residents, actually feel with their town centre. And so this is something I'm really proud of, and I think that anyone that's been involved in the development should be really proud of too, because it's got that how can we help philosophy, which is ultimately, I think, really what our community has said that they want from us as a local government. So well done, happy to support this one.
I'll just be very, very brief. I just also wanted to say I think this document's really great. It's got a lot of, it's kind of got sparkle. It's got, you know, it's got a bit of vision about what can happen in Mount Hawthorn, some really interesting ideas. It talks about, you know, Axford Park being the hub. I do think that some of our most successful businesses in Mount Hawthorn are part of the nighttime economy, and that we are seeing little hubs already emerging between Fairfield and Flinders is a very strong emerging nighttime economy, late night bookshop, as well as all the like little restaurants that are sparking up there. And yes, I think it is really great to have a place plan that shows that big and small things can happen, and it's not just a sort of like, you know, we've had the big debate about the master plan. I think place plans are really a great document to point to say there's the quick wins, the kind of, you know, the lighting and things that really kind of are a bit of nice sparkle that will add to the area and that can be done quite quickly. And then there's the sort of the more longer term planning around what that town centre's future is. So well done, Georgia, and thank you for all of your hard work. Any further comments? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? Declare it carried. So we're moving on to item number 10.3. I'm not sure if you've seen this item. Can we perhaps have it up on the screen? It was a very late item and it is quite straightforward. If you haven't seen it, I'm sure you can get across it in about 30 seconds. It's simply to deal with the fact that one of our nominated judges is no longer available, and we are seeking interest from a third council member to join the 2019 Vincent Garden Awards judging panel. So this is item 10.3. I'll read out the proper report. 10.3, late report 2019 Greening Vincent Garden Awards. And the recommendation is to appoint a council member to be part of the 2019 Greening Vincent Garden Awards final judging panel due to the absence of Councillor Rosalind Harley. But it does also state that there is no requirement for 3 council members on the judging panel if no alternative is available. Is there any one that would like to take part? You'd like to speak? Would you can move the item. Are you happy to move the item, Councillor Fotakis?
I'm happy to move the item.
Thank you. And who's seconding? Councillor Castle.
Okay. I just want to make a note that there are 2 North Ward councillors already on there. I didn't until I looked at that. There would have been a bit skewed for the North. Happy for the North to take over again, but maybe a suggestion that one of our other councillors might want to actually participate as well.
Councillor Murphy, I'm just going to caution you on your comments. Luckily your microphone wasn't turned on. I'm moving to the seconder.
I'd like to commend all of you and encourage you to join Councillor Fotakis and I on what is a wonderful day. That does finish with a celebration and some light refreshments, should Councillor Murphy be swayed by that. I think it's a great idea to have a South Ward representative to join us. It's always enjoyable and you'll learn something about how to maintain your garden, so join us.
do I have a nomination? Oh, Councillor Hallett is now in the competition. Go ahead, Councillor Hallett.
Unless there are any other nominators.
Councillor Murphy, are we going to have an election on our hands? No, you happy? Okay, so it looks like Councillor Hallett is the only nominee. There being no others, we welcome you, Councillor Hallett, to the 2019 Greening Vincent Garden Awards judging panel. Congratulations. Yes, I'm getting to that. All those in favour? Declare it carried. The next item is 12.2, Report and Minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held on the 27th of August 2019. Moved by Councillor Loden, seconded by Councillor Gondaszewski.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of things that came up with the Audit Committee. We had the fraud prevention findings that came down from the Auditor General. The City of Vincent was one of 4 councils that was selected for an actual detailed audit other than just answering a questionnaire, which was done across the board. There were a number of recommendations that applied to those 4 councils and also to the City of Vincent in that case, not to identify specifically the cases of fraud, but that there are improvements in our processes that we can and should make to reduce the risk of fraud occurring within the city. We also had the payroll audit, which has been a long outstanding audit action item that has now been completed. It subsequently resulted in a whole series of new actions that we need to do, particularly because we have such a heavily manual process involved, which we can now work through and address. Hopefully our ICT strategy that's underway will help to address some of those issues around the manual aspect of the payroll, which is where the risk around errors really occurs. And also just wanted to note that we closed a number of outstanding actions that have been ongoing for quite a while since I've been on the Audit Committee. There's a whole heap of new ones, but at least we don't have a whole heap of actions that are about 4 or 5 years old sitting on there. They're all relatively recent actions that have come through and that we're progressively working through and closing out. So I am supportive of the audit minutes and yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Loden. Councillor Gondaszewski, do you wish to speak? Okay. Anyone wish to comment on the Audit Committee minutes? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour, declare the minutes carried. Thank you. That brings us to our last report for the evening, item 12.5. This is an absolute majority decision. Amendments to council delegations. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Move Councillor Toppelberg, seconded Councillor Hallett. Don't wish to speak to it? Councillor Hallett, do you wish to speak to it? Anyone wish to comment? Everyone's happy? We did discuss it at the briefing last week. Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? I declare the item carried. There being no further business for the evening, I declare the meeting closed at 7:21 p.m. Thank you, everyone.